What's going on, guys, and welcome back. We have the best season of Marvel Snap yet, and easily the best cards to come to the game. We're going to give our early thoughts and review, as well as a season pass preview. We're also going to talk about the current state of the Marvel Snap meta and underrated decks that people are not playing. And then lastly, guys, we're going to cover the OTA changes and all the card balances now that they've been out in some decks. In the latter, we're going to give our final thoughts. We're going to talk about all that and more on today's episode of the Snapchat. And as always, I'm joined by Mr. Alex Coccia. It's our first Monday Snapchat. We have a brand new season of Marvel Snap. It's May 1st. It's crazy, man. April is already over. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great, and honestly, I've been having such a blast playing Marvel Snap lately. The over-the-air updates are doing wonderful things to the meta. Everything feels fresh. I feel like there's way more deck diversity than ever before. Cozy, it is a great time to be a Marvel Snap player.
Yeah, we had our first OTA patch. We have easily the best season ahead of us. I mean, the new cards, even the new season pass. It's Guardians of the Galaxy, which the movie reviews have been off the charts, man. And then our topics today are just fire. So what are we talking about on your side of the channel?
We're going to be talking about our infinite decks of the season, the ones that we relied on to get to infinite and get those cubes when it mattered most. We're also going to be talking about the cards that carried us this season, because there's a bunch of cards that have been really standouts and have been, just kind of shining stewards in the glow of Marvel Snap. Moreover, we're going to be discussing something that is critical to Marvel Snap, and I think a major point of kind of conversation across all forums, and that is Galactus a problem? And I'm very interested in seeing what you have to say.
Yeah, we talked about upcoming villains the last Snapchat, and we really rang that true, as we could see the last couple of weeks. And also just the meta in general is at a really good and refreshing place. There's a lot of decks that are competitive at the moment and a lot of card diversity too. So I think this is going to be one of the most exciting episodes of the Snapchat. But besides that, dude, the new season, I can't. So let me ask you this. Are you a fan of Guardians of the Galaxy? Did you enjoy the films?
I'm a huge fan of Guardians of the Galaxy. In fact, almost every single night with my son, we actually watch Baby Groot. There's these Baby Groot shorts. We watch them all the time, every night. He asks about Baby Groot all the time. And he actually says, Dad, show me Iron Man building his suit. But we're really into Guardians of the Galaxy, and he loves Rocket, and he loves obviously Baby Groot and stuff like that.
Yeah, we talked about this with the Ant-Man one, but I love when the season lines up with movie premieres. And I've already seen the ratings of Guardians of the Galaxy 3 just off the charts. It has the first MCU F-bomb, dude. I love it. And I love that James Gunn, just phenomenal director, is proud of that too. He's like, heck yeah, man. I want to be the first official F-word in the MCU. And Kevin Feige was like, are you sure? And he's like, this is what I live for, man. So anyway, it is Guardians of the Galaxy month. We have not only a Guardians of the Galaxy featured card that looks insane, but we also have, by far, it's not even close, Alex, the best new cards that we have seen ever. And I cannot wait to dive into these cards, give our early impressions, our rankings, everything about it. And we got to start with the Season Pass card in Nebula. Now, Nebula, guys, there's been some confusion. Nebula is going to be a 1/1, which, Alex, as you know, we love our 1 cost, man. And it's going to be exciting to everyone to get Kitty for free. And then we have Nebula. So a lot of refreshment to the 1 cost. But Nebula here is each turn your opponent doesn't play a card where Nebula is, she's going to gain +2 power, except the turn that you played her. Dude, there is so much possibility of Nebula being one of the best 1 cost drops in the game now. I can't wait, because this just fits my playstyle to a T. What are your early thoughts on the card?
First of all, my early thoughts are that this card is going to be fantastic, but in particular, I like the idea that the development team is taking a concerted effort of making turn 1 relevant again. This is one of those cards that you don't play on turn 3. It just doesn't work that way. Kitty Pryde's the same way. It's a card you want on turn 1. And I think that we've had this meta where even with Silver Surfer's meta, you just skip 3 turns and it doesn't matter. Sure, you could skip almost 4 turns and it didn't matter, right? This with Nebula and Kitty Pryde, turn 1 matters again. And I think that's super important, because I think it really helps to shake out what a 3-minute card game should feel like, right? Each turn should be relevant, and I think that brings us back to that.
Yeah, Nebula wasn't my favorite character in the films per se, but as a card, I think it's really going to be Sunspot, her, and maybe Kitty if the rework feels as good as she, or even a little bit as good as she was. These are going to be the main 1 cost. I think that's my only fear, is that now there's, I guess there's 3 now and not only Sunspot, right? Obviously Killmonger exists, but we've seen Sunspot dominate for so long, it doesn't matter all that much. But there's a lot that we'll talk about, but I think Killmonger is going to get even more prevalent with just everything going on with this season, and obviously Nebula is going to play a big part in that. So if you don't get the season pass, Killmonger in your deck, you're going to feel pretty good about it. So Alex, right away, I think she'll average to be maybe a 1.5, 1.7. I mean, what's cool about her is just the way Marvel Snap plays out, right? you can't play cards in her location every time. So if you get her on turn 1, you're going to get yourself a pretty good Nebula no matter what. Like, your opponent is going to have to spread themselves out.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no question that like it's a card that like requires your opponent to be reactive to it. You can't just leave it and let it run all day long. And also, like the other side to that is there's going to be locations that generally benefit from it as well, like miniaturized lab. It's going to be one where like you can just sit there and like your opponent can't answer. It's incredible what this card will be able to do. And remember, a 1/3 is kind of like the baseline for kind of getting a 1 cost value. 1/3, like if you think about Hawkeye, you got to meet that condition, you get 1/3. 0, you meet a condition, you get 1/3. So Nebula, I mean, they just don't play there once and it's a 1/3. That's easy.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of what surprised me. I think when I first saw her, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. And then I started to think about the decks that she actually fits in. And she's pretty damn plug and playable, Alex. Like, she can go into nearly any deck, I feel like. And as you know, love control. And I feel like control is going to be an awesome place for her, right? Because you just said miniaturized lab. Like, if you throw her into Kiln right before turn 4 ends, or you Pro X the lane that she's on top, or you do, you know, any type of storm flooding, like, she's just going to build up that power. Even if they Doctor Doom into a flooded lane, well, you have this huge Nebula now. So, pretty excited about her possibility in control decks. I think she's going to be good. Also, to build up power, then you can even Killmonger yourself and then null it. Or there's a lot of different scenarios here, man. Kind of like 1 through 5 star. What's your early impression?
My early impression is like a 4. I feel like it's a 4 and a decent 4. Kitty Pryde for me was a 5. Like the initial Kitty Pryde release was an absolute 5. I feel like this is not quite as good as that, but I feel like it's still an excellent card. And I think you bring up a great point about the storm locations, by the way, because this is a great card to go alongside something like a Juggernaut on turn 4 if you don't draw on turn 1, and then you have that, you know, Storm Juggernaut Nebula, and that Nebula is just ticking upwards, and it should, in theory, be enough to counteract something like a Doctor Doom on the other side.
Combined with that too, what about bounce, right? Like, let's say you play her down, she gets a bunch of points up, your opponent fills up another lane, you bounce her back, throw her in the lane that's already filled up, and then she can keep bouncing more. Like, truly, I think she's going to fit into a lot of decks. And this might be, I know we've said this a good amount this last season, obviously had a really good card, and then obviously we had Zabu, Silver Surfer. This might be one of the most universal because of it being a 1-drop. I think this is one of the more important seasons, if you are one that does get season passes from time to time, to snag the card. This is going to be a good one, man.
It does definitely fit into so many different archetypes. Like, it has a universal appeal, like you're saying, which I think is super valuable. And I think that's kind of a good approach for a season pass card, because sometimes like one could make the argument that MODOK was like a little niche, but also MODOK's incredible, right?
Insane, yeah.
But niche still. This could really go into almost anything. And I think now we're starting to see why like that Sunspot nerf makes a little more sense. But at the same time, we're getting more competition. I almost wonder if Sunspot gets brought up to a 1/1 again, because like you're gonna have Kitty Pryde, Nebula. Like, I mean, there's competition now.
Yeah, I feel like Sunspot has felt like he's in a good place, but yeah, he definitely has more competition. I think also what I love about her is what she does on turn 5, right? Like, I'm fans of, let's say, Negasonic, right? You place Negasonic down, and they can't, like, you kind of cover that lane. Well, if you put Nebula down, right, it kind of forces them to play in that lane, or she's gonna go up in power, and you would win that lane, right? So you could just kind of drop her and forget her, even if it's on, like, turn 4 or 5, right? And it puts that pressure, kind of like a Jessica Jones almost, right? Like, in a weird way of, like, your opponent is gonna have to address that, and then you can focus on another lane. Like, seriously, there's so much more there than what first meets the eye, and it blows me away. I think they did a great job. She went through a lot of different iterations of how she was going to work, and she was a 4-cost, and she had different abilities. And also, Alex, I think it's good that they didn't exactly give her an on-reveal effect ongoing. I think just text as it is works for me.
I think there's a lot of value in the way that they're approaching these newly designed cards, because I agree 100%. Making it an ongoing, especially with the buff to something like Enchantress, can be somewhat impactful. You have like, this is like collector style text where it just happens. Dracula style text, it just happens. And I totally agree with that, because as a 1-drop, it already has a significant downside of being Killmongered. So like, you can't just have it being deleted on all different fronts at all different points of the game. I think giving it some sort of safety from something like an Enchantress, I think is valuable.
Yeah, but dude, also we'd even like bring up the fact it makes Guardians of the Galaxy somewhat relevant cards. You know what I love to the lore is that you can play her down, then you can play like Star-Lord turn 2, then you can play like Groot turn 3. So if they don't put cards in that lane, you get the value from Nebula, and if they do, you get the value from Star-Lord, and then they're gonna have to play in other lanes, and Nebula's still gonna get that value, and then they're never gonna go back to that lane anyway. So There's so many ways to bring it together. I love that cards like Star-Lord, Drax, maybe, but more of Groot and Star-Lord, maybe even Rocket Raccoon, is going to get a little more value because of Nebula.
I've been thinking a lot about Adam Warlock. Like, if you throw Adam Warlock on top of the Nebula and they don't answer that, then you're just drawing cards right there, right? And if they do answer it, you follow it up with something like a Groot on turn 3, it's very likely that you start to outpace them at that point and start getting those cards. So it's kind of interesting to think about. And I think that Adam Warlock is kind of a winner with Nebula as well, that I think some deck crafting will have to see how effective, Adam Warlock can truly be. But we know, given the circumstances, Adam Warlock might be one of the best cards in the game.
Yeah, dude, talk about thematic. Like, see, I feel like there's going to be some serious balancing that's going to happen after this season, just between new cards and like how all these cards are going to affect play. It's going to be a good one. But we've got a lot of cards to talk about. Nebula, by the way, guys, I think that she's definitely a very solid. This is going to be replacing my kind of Is It Worth It episode that I do, since it's falling on the same day of the season. And to me, I'm giving this a 5-star. I think this is a definitely worth it season. Next season is more of a move-based season. We'll get to that, later in the month. So if you want to go in on a season in the next couple, this is, for now, the one that I would definitely kind of go all in for. I think you're going to use Nebula a good amount. Now, Alex, before we get to the crazy new cards, there's so much to talk about. Today's episode of the Snapchat is brought to you by Untapped GG. And Alex, I know that you use the deck tracker. I got to say, there's some decks that just feel way better when you know what's coming, like Jubilee decks and casino decks, really everything, as well as just seeing the stats, the win rates, and the cube rates. Guys, Untapped is the easiest sponsor to talk about because I actually do use it on a daily basis. Have you used it? I mean, it's legit.
I use it all the time. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and it's a great resource, a great tool, especially since, hey, discard's on the rise, right? Where like it tracks the discarded cards, it tracks destroyed cards, because I'm never paying attention to what's getting destroyed, honestly. So I mean, it's super useful. It's a great tool that I really enjoy using.
For me too, the other thing I love about it, and guys, just speaking the truth here, is like I can fact check myself. If I think a deck is really good, great, but then it has stats on my own decks, right? And I'm like, oh, dang. Okay, 67% win rate. I actually didn't know I was winning that many, right? You can find everything you need in the link below if you want to download the tracker for Untapped. And if you want to go ahead and see stats and stuff, they have more things to offer to the website there. Thank you to Untapped for sponsoring today's video. Now, let's go and move to our next card that is also a one-cost card. And we have Howard the Duck. Now, we have a lot of new cards coming. We're going to talk about all of them and our opinions. And I kind of want to give like our gut reactions and star ratings to what we think these are going to be. And then at the end, we'll kind of give like our order of priority. Hopefully you guys have been saving tokens. I hope you guys have, because there's at least a couple that you're definitely going to want to use this season. Howard the Duck, initial impressions, Alex.
I think it's pretty damn interesting. Like, I think this is a very fascinating card. It's one of those cards I think might be hard to put like a pinpoint number on. Like, if you're gonna say, Alex, from 1 to 5, what do you give it? Like, man, I don't even know. I lean towards like a 4 again, which I know is like a safe, like, hey, I think it's really good, but it's not gonna be broken. The reason for this is because, like, think about how many times you're in a situation where you're like, they snap, and you're like, am I gonna get my piece next turn? Am I drawing that card I need? Am I getting Silver Surfer on turn 6 so I can do the combo? Am I pulling MODOK on 5? Like, what's happening here? And sometimes Howard the Duck's going to give you that little ability to say, okay, what's there? I need to know what's there before, we commit. But at the same time, I actually am not 100% sure how the mechanic's going to work. My impression is going to be that it'll actually reveal during the course of the turn. So what I just described might not actually work as I perhaps would have liked. But it's how does it work?
No, you'll be able to tap during the turn, so you'll see what's happening next turn, and I think you were spot on. I think it's either gonna be a 2 out of 5 or like a 4, or like a 4 out of 5. The problem with him is that he takes a spot in a 12 card deck, right? And so it's like, is he gonna be worth that spot? I think if you combine him with the right cards, he's a no-brainer on some decks. If you pull him late, he's a bit awkward. With him and Daredevil, really good combination. Or you see Galactus coming and you're like, all right, am I going to get that Shang-Chi? Or am I going to get She-Hulk? Should I skip, right? Like, She-Hulk being top deck is fantastic. And then, obviously, we just got that the Jubilee change as well. And so now we have a really good addition to Jubilee, and obviously another card we'll talk about. It's going to be tough to tell, but I do love what he does. And I think in tournament play, I think in Conquest, he'll definitely see a lot there. I think that's going to be his best use. But I'm not sure, man. I agree. I'm on the fence.
But you bring up such an amazing point about Marvel Snap that I come back to all the time, is that as a 12-card game, like, each card has to have an immense role. It has to play in like a specific role in a deck. If it's not doing something that is absolutely mandatory or required for you to pull off a victory, it's got to get cut. Like each card carries so much weight in a 12 card deck. So I think you're right. Like sometimes Howard the Duck is going to be one of those situations where it's like a nice to have, but never necessary. Like, is it going to be one of those cards that like is just you make a deck, you're like, oh, I got Howard in it, but I got to put Iceman because Iceman does what Iceman does. It's tricky, isn't it?
I think and this is early, we'll rate him at the end, but he might be my least favorite of the new cards. Actually, he's definitely my least favorite of all the new cards because it's stiff competition.
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting card. And once again, like I would kind of agree with you. He's probably on the lower side of my interest level. I mean, there's going to be one that where everyone's going to be interested in. But I do also want to say that like we're going to be talking about a card that obviously synergizes incredibly with Howard the Duck and Iron Lad too, right? So if that card's really good, then Howard the Duck's going to be really good too. So they kind of are going to share a little bit of destiny, one might say.
All right, well, you just mentioned him, so that brings us to Iron Lad, the other new card coming out, or one of the others, and he is a 4/6 on reveal. Copy the text of your deck's top card. Alex, gut reaction. How do you feel like Iron Lad's going to be?
I feel like this is going to be a card that's either a 1 or a 5. Like it's like even wider in terms of its potential gap than Howard the Duck, like we discussed prior. It's a card that I feel like if we can find the right synergies with, could be absolutely meta defining. Like in the trailer, you saw like Iron Lad playing Galactus. Like I'm like, I did not consider that could happen. I'm like, no, not more Galactus. Why Iron Lad? Why would you do this? But like, it makes perfect sense though. But like at the same time, if you don't have Howard the Duck, then you're just rolling the dice. Like, what are you gonna get? It's a fascinating card. It's truly fascinating.
Dude, they keep showing Galactus in the season previews, and it's like, stop it. Stop showing Galactus. They showed him with a Nimrod and this one. They're like, you can put him in your Galactus decks. I'm like, you're putting salt on the wound, Second Dinner. And obviously, we'll talk about that on your side. But I think it's funny that they did show that and the potential. I'm going to have a bold take here in Iron Lad. This is my most exciting card. I think High Evolution is going to be so cool, so good as well. So obviously, he's going to be right up there in what he can do and probably offer more like for a token standpoint. But Iron Lad, I've never seen a card with so much potential, right? Because if you think about it, right, Marvel Snap, if you think about all the abilities, because it's copying the text, obviously not like ongoing or on reveal, it's not even the potential of just abusing those abilities a couple of times, Alex. It's that he has a 6 power stat line. Like, there's no way to make that bad, right? Like, if you... I just want to talk about some of the cards. We'll go through in a second and talk about the cards that I think he'll be the most busted with. But you can easily, outside of even Howard the Duck, construct a deck where Iron Lad almost always has not even like some value, but like significant value.
For what it's worth, people, Cozy has never missed when he says a card's going to be broken. He called Shuri. You've done this multiple times now where you've said, like, this is the card. It's going to be broken. So now you've sold me on Iron Lad. And I told you, I said it was going to be the 1 or a 5. Now you're like, okay, I guess it's going to be a 5. Like, you're right. Like, its deck building potential is incredible. And what it can do is incredible. And its stat line is also incredible. Like, it's just... It can also troll you, though, Cozy. It could troll you.
But he's a 4/6. So, like, let's say... first of all, Zabu makes him a 3/6, too, which is even... I can't even put that together. He could troll you, but he's kind of in the same way of, like, those kind of... my Patriot Casino deck that we'll talk about later. Like, build a deck to where, like, really the value's always there, right? So, like, for the most part. And then even if you whiff, dude... Even if it's Iceman in your deck, okay? You just played Iceman's effect for a 4/6 stat line. The stat line's still the same as the Enchantress that we're all going raw about. That's where I think he's going to be crazy. But let me just show you what I'm talking about and hype everybody up with me. Because seriously, I think this, when I was looking over the new cards, this was the one. It was the same effect with Shuri. I was like, this is going to be so much crazier. And he's not getting talked about. So on our ongoing cards, let's just take example, a card that's doing pretty well. How about Darkhawk, yeah? Darkhawk, he's a 4/0. Well, how about you start him at a 4/6? 6 extra power for Darkhawk's ongoing ability. And you're going to see this effect. I think it's mainly with the ongoing cards. Okay, so you have Darkhawk, craziness. Iron Man, okay, so now you have a 12 power card off the rip on the location of Iron Man. All right, we can keep it going. Mystique, a 3/6 or a 4/6 Mystique, and the ability that she copies. Obviously, Devil Dino gets, like a 3 power bump up. Blue Marvel is going to be, a potential 3-cost card that spreads the power. Any of the ongoing cards just seem kind of silly, man. I mean, seriously, kind of silly, as well as Hela. It's the stat line combined with his effect that truly kind of blows me away.
You're selling me. I actually had not considered Iron Man with Iron Lad. It's they almost look the same too. Like, it's crazy I had not made that connection, but you're absolutely right. If you have an Iron Man effect starting with a 6 like power, like what are we even doing? That's insane. You are right. And I never considered that before.
The 3 or 4 costs, like if you Zabu them out, right? And that's the thing. If you look at a lot of the 4 cost cards, right? Like even if you were building kind of like a Zabu based deck, which I think we're kind of, there's a lot out there right now that are having the effect of 4 cost cards even better. Like, dude, even copying, let's say, Dracula, Wong, right? White Tiger. Any of those, are you mad that they're 4/6 and do their effect?
It's unbelievable. Like, yeah, White Tiger's huge. That's an incredible stat line considering that tiger comes flying out, which can access locations that you can't really play into. It gives you a lot of flexibility. There's some RNG there. But yeah, that's an insane amount of stats for potentially 3 energy with a Zabu on the board.
And then combine that with Howard the Duck, where you can actually see what that's going to be, right? I don't know. I think he is probably the most underrated right now out of the bunch.
What offsets this as well, though, is that your opponent now knows what you've drawn. Because no matter what the effect is, your opponent... I don't know how the effect works. Does it actually show the card to the opponent?
Yeah.
Because if it does, then like either way, like they're going to know. If they see the Rock Slide effect, they know the Rock Slide effect just happened. And Rock Slide's coming into your hand next turn,
That's
right?
a good point.
So that's... You're scouting for your opponent.
Yeah,
right?
so he might be better on a late gameplay, like a turn 6, and that's where I think Howard will have a lot of his like usefulness outside of Howard then being the top card, and then that like super screws you, right? But other than that, I think that's where he can help out a lot, or again turn 5, turn 6. But that's a good point. Maybe better like turn 5, or you've already snapped because you kind of have a lot of the cards, and like let's say you drew your 2/1 costs that are in your deck, right? And you're like, okay, it's just value, it's snapping time, like no matter what, right? So I think there's gonna be that. Man, copying Null too. Like, I don't know. There's gonna be a lot of fun things that come with him, and I'm excited to see kind of how it all plays out, and like bouncing him back, and then how does that all work? It's gonna be silly, but also incredible.
I can just see how excited you are to build like the next broken deck that shatters the meta with his Iron Lad. Like Rocks and Hawks and Lads, you know what I mean? Like they're coming out and everyone's going to be just crushing people with Dark Hawks and Iron Lads and Rock Slides. There's going to be rocks all over the place. There's going to be ducks quacking in the board. It's going to be wild, Cozy.
My son's going to love Howard the Duck. He's obsessed with ducks lately. Are your kids obsessed with anything? Like your younger ones?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I actually have a friend that has a duck farm. It sounds so made up. It almost sounds made up. A duck farm? He has a whole bunch of ducks, like a ton of ducks. And so my kids will go there and they'll play with the ducks and pet the ducks. They're actually surprisingly friendly. Okay. They'll kind of like waddle away and stuff, but like they don't really peck you. They don't get angry. You can feed them out of your hand. Like they're pretty docile, honestly. They're nice, and yeah, my kids like ducks. Why?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm more asked if your kids have an obsession with anything. Mine kid was ducks. I kind of hate birds altogether. I kind of think they just suck.
I can see that. Like we have blue jays where I'm from, so blue jays will actually fight other birds. I watched a blue jay headbutt a squirrel off of a bird feeder. So you wouldn't know this, but Canadian geese, like they're like huge bird things. They look like mini ostriches, right?
Yeah.
They are absolutely evil. They will run at you and attack you ruthlessly for no reason whatsoever. And they end up everywhere too. Like I used to work at a place where like they would all congregate like on a field where like the entrance of a building was. And if you were walking to the building, they would just start running at you. And like we'd have like old ladies be like, "Oh my God," like swinging the purse around trying to fight these geese.
It's the best pay-per-view of all time. I mean, like I would watch that on TV. I mean, but that's why I hate them. They're just they don't.
Dude, we'd stand at the window and just watch. We would watch old ladies fight Canadian geese nonstop. And old ladies, they don't run fast. The geese catch up.
Oh my God.
They catch up.
I wish I could content create for that so badly. Just like bird fights and birds fighting people. Dude, it'd be off the... There's got to be a channel for this already. There's got to be a Canadian channel.
It sounds illegal, honestly. Like if we started like a bird fight club, I don't know if that would do so well. I don't know if that could be monetized.
When would we step in, right? Like if the bird's like really kicking the lady's ass, when do you go in there and help her out, or do you just watch it for the content?
I think eventually you do have to step in like a referee in a UFC fight. You got to get in there. Got to like, make sure she can, she's all right. First rule about bird fight clubs is that we shouldn't be talking about bird fight clubs. So I think we need to.
Yeah. We made a big mistake here for sure. And guys, if you see another channel come up that's called BFC, then, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. All right, we digress. High Evolutionary, a 4/7, folks. If you have not heard about him yet, at the start of the game, unlock a secret ability of all your cards with no abilities, right? So it's going to negate the Patriot effect, and the Hulk and all these cards we're about to bring up are now going to have a new ability. And I gotta say, man, First of all, what a cool concept of a card. I mean, we talk about cards that impact other cards. This has got to be up there as one of the biggest. And there's just so much to unpack here, man. Initial impressions of High Evo.
My initial impression is that you have to get this card because it is so just incredible of a design. Like, it's one of those things, like, even when I talked about when Thanos was released, like, I don't know if this card's even going to be that good. It was good, but like, it unlocks a completely new archetype, and that's exactly what High Evolutionary does. I actually had a friend just today text me, hey, I have enough tokens for, tokens for Thanos. Do I buy Thanos? I said, no. Hold out to see how High Evolutionary does, because I think this card is gonna be legit. I think it's gonna be good. I think it's a whole new mechanic. I love the idea of like conserving energy and building a deck around conserving energy. Another reason why probably Sunspot shouldn't get buffed anymore, and probably as a 1/0 is probably just fine, because High Evolutionary is gonna be a Sunspot deck in my opinion, right? So I think there's gonna be a lot of really interesting things coming out of High Evolutionary, and I don't know if we have confirmation if it's a big bat or not, but I might expect it to be.
I feel like with his ability, it might be, right? We have one other card to talk about that fits the role more, but this one I think is going to be better, so it just depends on what they decide to do. What's cool about him is that he kind of can make 3 different decks, and people are kind of missing that fact, right? So first of all, you have the pure deck of High Evo and all of those non-ability cards. By the way, all of those cards, pull 1 and 2 outside of Wasp, and that's all you need to have the complete package of all those cards. Super cool there, and that's what we mean by just the value that you'll have, especially, dude, going into pool 3, this is like the new card to make sure you get, right, for the most part. So you have that. And then once we break down these abilities, you guys are going to see either skipping your turns and floating energy is one path, or putting negative points on the enemy side of the board through their cards is the other path. And there's so many different hybrids that you can build. So let's go ahead, and Alex, we're going to bring up all those no ability cards and what they do, and let's give kind of like our first impressions of those cards. And we start with the lower of the end here, even though Cyclops isn't on this one, but we have Wasp, Shocker, and the Thing here. So let's start with Wasp, man, and a little bit of error here, but essentially 2 random enemy cards are going to get -1 power, not +1 power. So that's a 0-3, right? Just stat line. Not bad. I mean, my biggest example of use here would just be Lockjaw. You throw it into that lane, it does the negative effect, goes in, doesn't matter. You already got kind of a quick, like, -3 out on the board, and then out comes another card, or -2 on the board, and then out comes another card. Also, we have the Thing, who it's going to be it's somewhat of the same ability, -1, but it can hit the same card 3 times, which is also really unique, and I love that about the Thing. I don't know if that's going to really increase his play all that much, but when you see kind of how the decks work, we can see his possibilities. And then Shocker, which I'm kind of back and forth on Shocker. Essentially, his secret abilities on reveal, guys, the leftmost card in your hand costs 1 less. Obviously, this can be built to be really good. And is has the potential to be a free Psylocke, obviously, right? And Sarah. But a lot of the times, if that hits your Wasp or whatever, it just isn't going to be there. But, essentially it's, a 1-3 at that point.
I agree. My first initial impression was if that hits Wasp, that's big. That's a big useless card, right? And like Shocker is a good card in just standard Patriot. I think it's a very good card. And this has the Nakia effect, right? Like, how often is Nakia just like a troll where you're like, if it just doesn't, why is it just hitting the left side? Like, I need it to hit the right side, or I just need to hit something. And Nakia used to hit everything in your hand, if you remember correctly, right? Yeah. And so this ability is a little weird.
Yeah, we'll talk about this at the end of High Evo, but I think hybrid decks will end up being the best, and especially for Shocker, man. I love the idea. Like, really, 5 and 6 cost cards. That's the value that is tremendous with Shocker, right? Because we have Zabu for 4 costs. Everything else is easy to kind of get out there. So I think that's where Shocker gets his most value, and especially when we talk about kind of these hybrid decks a bit more. Now, our next set of cards is going to be kind of a good lot of them. We have Cyclops, Misty Knight, the Hulk, and Abomination. Now, oh my god, all of these look great. So let's start with Misty Knight. Secret ability, when you end a turn with unspent energy, give another friendly card +1 power. It's okay for a 1-cost drop. It's not bad.
She'll definitely have a spot. However, the question becomes is like, when do you actually float the energy? Because if you play her on 1 and then you play a 2-drop on 2, she's never floating power to buff anything. She'll never buff herself because it has to be another friendly card. So I think there's a lot of deck building consideration here, which I think has to kind of be put on the forefront where, I think that you like all these unspent energy cards will have to they'll have to have a deck that's designed very carefully in order to maximize that effectiveness.
Absolutely, man. And then Cyclops, his secret ability is when you end a turn with unspent energy, afflict 2 random enemies here with -1 power. This is where everything kind of comes together. Both Hulk and Abomination are the two cards that, tie all these other cards that we just talked about together. Abomination is, they're both probably easily the best here, Hulk and Abomination. His a secret ability, he's a 5/9, cost 1 less for each enemy card in play that's afflicted with negative power. Now, this is crazy. You're going to get yourself probably a free A-bomb whenever you want and bomb them on the board. Dude, this is nutso for those negative decks.
It's pretty wild. And like one thing that comes to mind here is like, how could magic be used in these lists, right? Like if you magic and you extend the games to provide these cards with more opportunities to get these additional negative procs, you're not floating energy on turn 5. Unless, of course, Shocker hits magic, then hey, look at that, right? It's magic, right? That was a good pun, Alex. Well done.
I like
it.
But
at the end of the day, though, like if you use magic and then all of a sudden you have a 7-turn game, like there's a chance that on turn 7, like you're dropping Hulk and Abomination at the same time and just crushing the board state. And that's not even that hard. Like you can even do it on turn 6 provided you get the right draw.
Yeah, no question. I think post-credit Miracle is what I used to call the deck, where you have, you skip turn 6, you have the free She-Hulk. Hopefully you Moon Girled that She-Hulk, and that whole deck is built around giving up your energy anyway. And so I love that idea, most likely for the energy deck, opposed to the negative power deck if I were to separate them. But dude, this is my thought, okay? We just had Lizard, and we'll talk about him here coming up. But we just had Lizard get a little bit of a nerf, okay? So there's already a 2 cost that's on the rise, Scorpion. If you hit the opponent's opening hand with Scorpion, you have a free A-bomb, pretty much right off the bat. I mean, they have to play those cards, so that's the only kind of caveat there. But if you're having him with the other cards, simply just Scorpion in the deck is going to be like all you need with A-bomb and High Evo. Like those 3 and then maybe Cyclops, it seems a little wacky, yeah?
It is insane. I actually had not considered that right off the bat, that Scorpion would have that impact. And you're right, because it's just anything that's in play that's been afflicted with negative energy. So if there's a card in play and it's been hit with Scorpion, it might as well have been hit by Misty Knight or Cyclops. It doesn't really matter. You're absolutely right. And I already thought the Scorpion was on the rise with the nerf to Lizard. And oh man, I think you nailed it. I think Scorpion's going to be a wild card. We're going to need a whole lot of our friend, Mr. Big Muscles. You know what I'm talking about.
He was my favorite 2 costs on our last episode. Luke Cage, man, is going to be... These 2 cards are going to get the most play. First of all, I want a quick from everybody, whether you're at work, your car, just a moment of silence for Cerebro decks. Just a quick moment. They're dead. With Scorpion out there, man, it's... Oof. They had a good month, man. It had a good month. They are going to be totally screwed with all those Scorpions. Luke Cage was my favorite card and one of my most underrated our last couple of episodes, and now this will be his month, no question, because you can both counter the opponent's A-bomb for free and the negative stuff going on your side, and keep yourself up, and the location synergy. But yeah, Luke Cage looks really good. I think these are going to be just kind of these token cards that fit into a lot of decks now. And then guys, Hulk, right? Secret ability, he's 6'12". Finally, Hulk can smash, guys. Ongoing effect, plus 2 power for each turn you ended with unspent energy. Alex, if you skipped them all, which you probably wouldn't, right? But theoretically, you can pump all of your energy to Sunspot, and then you have a She-Hulk, and you have a plus 10 power Hulk. So 22?
You literally just go AFK and win the game, basically. And then they Shang-Chi and you cry. But you know what? Oh, no, they'll have turn initiative. You still just win.
Hulk is where I think the whole post-credit Miracle deck is going to come to rise. There's just going to be so much energy being floated out there, and there's other cards that take advantage of that a lot as well. I don't know, man. So let's kind of like wrap this all up for High Evo. Will there be a deck that uses all these cards, right? Yeah, maybe. I think we're going to see some High Evo pure decks, right? I truly think, though, the negative version or the floating version is going to be what we're going to see the most common.
It's crazy how I think that High Evolutionary is going to unlock multiple avenues to the card. Kind of like, I mean, let's talk about Thanos for a sec, too. Like, Thanos has the Destroy Thanos, the Ongoing Thanos, it had the Lockjaw Thanos. There were kind of mini archetypes within Thanos itself, which was one of the reasons why we thought it was such a fascinating card. High Evolutionary does the same thing, and I think you nailed it. We're never going to build a deck where we're using all those cards at once. It's going to be those cards as a splash in with, I don't want to say traditional cards, but no secret ability cards that are just going to do do a damn good job to activate those other ones as well, like the Sunspots and the She-Hulks. Moon Girl is going to be huge for that replication, right?
Evo, here's the thing. I said Iron Lad is the one that I'm... Both of these are equal, just so insane, and that is such a good feeling. We need more cards with this amount of hype and this amount of game-changing abilities. That is just going to bring a fresh take to Marvel Snap, really, in general. All before Conquest drops, man. Super stoked about High Evo, and I think he's definitely going to be the card that everybody... he is a no regrets, no think about it purchase. But he's going to take a little bit of time for everyone to find that best deck, and it's going to be a wild week when he comes out, dude. So we have one last card, and it's crazy to think we have one more to talk about here. And if you don't know, the Living Tribunal is one of the biggest characters in Marvel. One of the most powerful. I think he's like second on the line. There's like the one above all else, I think, is above him. A little rough there. I don't even know how he'll ever come into like MCU stuff. He's a 6/4, and he has an ongoing effect. Split your total power evenly amongst all locations. Initial impressions, Alex, go.
It seems like a wild card. It seems like an absolutely wild card that can do a ton of damage to the meta. But at the same time, I think it also is pretty balanced as a 6/4 if you consider what 6-drops can do to this game. It means that, like, again, I've talked about this on this podcast where I said that I like the idea of making turns 1 through 5 matter. I like the idea of having high impact plays on turns 1 and 2 so that, like, when the game starts to kind of fully form, you're able to use Living Tribunal to really showcase how much power you've put on the board. I like that. I think it's a fascinating card. I think the fact that it's an ongoing is unique because it does provide some counterplay. You can't just Electro it out or Jubilee it out or anything like that and not risk it getting absolutely clapped up. I think that's kind of important. It's a fascinating card. Definitely fascinating card.
1 through 5, what do you give it?
I mean, I don't want to say 4 again, but my initial impression is probably a 4. The fact that it's a 6-drop, I think, kind of limits its ceiling because you're going to have to use Wave to get out something like, an Onslaught so that you can then Iron Man. But if you've just Onslaughted Iron Man onto a location to play Living Tribunal, what's your turn 6 look like, right? Like, I think there's like a cap on its power as a 6-drop, which I think is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, when I was kind of preparing everything for the show here, I think initial impressions, you see this, and you're like, cracked, broken, high evo, crazy. And then once I kind of dived into the cards, that's what kind of skyrocketed Iron Lad. And it made me come to earth with Living Tribunal. I actually don't love it. I think it's crazy because I've thought it's a good card for a while now. But the more I read into it, 4 power, turn 6, it surely is going to have to almost be in a ramp deck. You know what it feels like to me? It's kind of like Mr. Negative. When he pops, he's gonna pop, and when he doesn't, he's gonna be what he does. I think he's a lot like Galactus, very unique. I think his best role is a surprise card, right? Like you kind of hide him in a deck, and then all of a sudden you're not winning, and you're like, well, if I do the math, boom, and you split it. But now he is an ongoing as well. And so, I don't know. Like, obviously, yeah, if you cheat him out early, Enchantress is going to be everywhere now. To me, he seems super fun on paper. I think there are going to be wacky games with him. Dude, like Mojo World? What is that? 100 power? It's split across, right? So, like, there's going to be wacky games with him as well. And maybe things like Iron Lad can work with him or whatever if you do that as well. But yeah, like, I think the Onslaught and the Iron Man, all that craziness sounds really cool. But will it execute? I think the devs know what they're doing. I don't know. I'm not so thrilled as I once was.
It's a fascinating discussion because, like, it's one of those things where, like, it's a card that, like, we can't fully understand until we get our hands on it and start testing it. Like, a couple thoughts cross my mind. First, is it going to have a very predictable play pattern, kind of like Galactus? You know when Galactus is coming, right? Does Living Tribunal have that? Because it's essentially a vertical zoo card. You go extremely vertical in a lane, but it actually zoos out wide, right? So is there going to be a play pattern that kind of showcases that, right? Is it going to be, I don't know, is it going to be Mojo into something else? I'm just trying to make garbage up, but like Devil Dinosaur, Darkhawk, like who knows what kind of super vertical cards you get. But at the same time, it doesn't mean you can't play cards in the other lanes, right? Because you still can. But at the end of the day, it can be hard to determine how this card is actually going to impact the meta because, like, as an ongoing card, and a lot of the ongoing cards are the ones that really try to ramp up power-wise, Enchantress just got buffed. Is this kind of the answer to it? Because, like, I don't know if just dropping Living Tribunal as a surprise card on 6 is going to be enough.
You know where I think he's going to work the best, and I'm giving away some of my strats here. I don't really care. I always give them away. The 2 decks I like, I think junk decks are going to work a lot because you need to clog the opponent's side to where they can't get a lot of power across the lanes. That's where it's going to work the best. I think our head goes to like big power, which is sure, all that's great. But I think it's going to be those decks where like you prevent your opponents from putting out power, and then you pump out your own power. And then even if it's like 12 across the board, whatever, right? They can't match that. I think possibilities there. Iron Lad, Iron Man, Onslaught, that kind of stuff is going to be a little nutty too. The deck design is going to be specific, which makes me feel like it's a little bit like Mr. Negative. I guess maybe in a Mr. Negative deck with like Black Panther, Shuri, Wong, that's where you can get some good stuff going.
And it's also worth noting here that this circumvents a lot of the troublesome locations as well. There's going to be locations like Altar of Death and Sanctorum and stuff like you just can't play into. And it's one of the reasons why Mr. Fantastic is such a good card. Like, this is basically a turn 6 Fantastic. In a different way, obviously.
Yep, I'm calling it now. Super high cube rate, really low win rate. I think that's how he's going to work out, just like Mr. Negative. The games he wins, he'll do great. The games he doesn't. Or as an alternate card, just as a card that you can play, like, let's say in your high Evo deck, you have the turn 6 skip. Things didn't work out. You're like, you know what? I'll just play a She-Hulk and him, end it. It's over. Maybe that's where he fits in.
The thing that I want to go back to here is the idea that, like, we talked about this in one of our first episodes of the Snapchat, where like we were talking about strategies, winning, snapping, and stuff like that. And it always came back to the idea that you only have to win 2 lanes in Marvel Snap, right? You win 2 lanes, you win the game. And so understanding that, Living Tribunal tries to win 3 lanes, right? And sometimes that's not ideal. Splitting your power across all 3 lanes is not always ideal when a game where you win 2, you win the game.
What are you ranking them, right? Like 1 through 4, what are you... I would say for myself, it would be... Probably for the public, High Evo, Iron Lad, Tribunal, and then the Duck.
I would definitely say High Evo number 1, Iron Lad number 2, Living Tribunal 3, Howard the Duck 4, assuming that they're all 6s, right? They're all 6,000 tokens, right?
So, okay, obviously a lot of time here on that subject. We took down the graphic. We have Dr. Doom representing the state of the meta and underrated decks. We're going to be quick through these kind of subjects just because of all the time we did spend on the preview. But Alex, I don't know about you, man. I feel like even though there are some hated cards at the moment, obviously Galactus, right? Sandman was. This is a really, really good meta and a very undiscovered one at the moment. I feel like it's still wide open. There are so many competitive decks at the moment. How do you feel?
I feel like this is the best the meta has been in a very long time. When almost any deck can be competitive or any deck can catch your opponent by surprise because there's just so much going on right now, I think that's a really positive thing. I do think there's a couple outliers still. I do think I'm seeing way more Galactus than I should be. That's one thing that we'll discuss later on as well. But overall, like, just as a kind of like that 100-foot glancing view of the meta, like, I think it's the best it's ever been. I think the over-the-air updates are doing exactly what they've advertised. They're shaking things up. They're shaking things up fast, like every week. It's a lot, Cozy.
They're better. It's better than I thought. I thought we were going to get like a crystal PowerPoint or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but then you have Enchantress getting 2 power. You know what? We're going to just combine these 2 topics. Why not, right? Because I think they kind of go hand in hand very well. Both the balance patch overview and this, because they tie together a lot, right? Enchantress is where we have to start, right? Because I feel like she is the one that's going to be affecting a lot of our meta conversation. I don't know if she lasts at 6 power, because to me that sounds bonkers. 5 power is still a lot and still crazy. Because of now going on months that I made this video of Sarah Miracle, Sarah control decks, obviously it is at a really good place. And with Hitmonkey, already a good place. And then you put Enchantress here. Now, I love that they did it. Ongoing had a bit too much of a presence, even though, yes, Shang-Chi, those cards were out there, right? But you can have, an 8-power Darkhawk and Devil Dino. I love it because it puts Enchantress back into decks, and it creates that fear a little bit.
The fear of Enchantress is extremely important. It does a couple things. First of all, it provides counterplay towards all those ongoing cards of Devil Dino Hawk. You have the Sarah plays as well, but Sarah's tricky. It goes on 5 when you're gonna play Enchantress on 6 on a Sarah. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's more for the Darkhawks, I think. Like Rocks and Hawks, I think, is targeted specifically. Ruthless. They went after you, Cozy.
They went after me.
They went after you. Yeah. They said, no, Cozy, you can't do this. You can't do this to the meta with your super high win rate percentage tournament decks that just everyone uses to infinite. How dare you do that?
It killed me, man. Again, first of all, it kills me that, listen, guys, Devil, Dino, Hawk, I don't know what deck that is. I've seen it on Twitter. It is Rocks and Hawks. It's been there since January. All right, I love the name, but it's taken a hit, man. But what I will say is it's still okay because of the variance play. And, guys, Cosmo solves that issue a lot of the time. You just have to be... I think for the general player, it makes the deck a lot worse. it changes it somewhat for people that have used the deck a lot, though.
You kind of brought up that you thought that Enchantress was almost too strong. You can see her being dialed back to 4-5. I would be surprised because, like, I do think, listen, I know I sound crazy. We're so used to Enchantress being a 4-4. And, like, it was still good. And actually, we're talking about underrated decks. I had a Silver Surfer deck where I was playing Enchantress, okay, because of the prevalence of Rocks and Hawks, Patriot. It was a 4-4. I was playing it on turn 4. And I had a 69% win rate over like a lot of games with that deck. It's one of the ones that took me to Infinite. Talk about underrated deck, okay? And that was before the buff. When it got buffed, I was like, seriously? This is like one of my sleeper cards. And like the buff, I was like, you know what? I think that this card is not only even better than it was before, but now that fear factor is going to take something like Rocks and Hawks out of the meta. So now I don't need Shang-Chi anymore because like Shang-Chi was being used to knock out those Devil Dinosaurs and those Darkhawks. It opens up the meta in a way where like you're going to see the play rate of Shang-Chi come down because now people aren't going to be running as high with the Devil Dino Hawk lists.
Well, dude, it was a 50% play rate of Shang and 8% of Enchantress before the change. And that's where the change needed to happen. I think 4-5 will still have them both kind of brought up to an even level. I think our guy Glenn has been killing it here. Glenn, I think, has even addressed this, that they had to do this a week out because then they have proper testing. And then like Super Scroll Patriot kind of rose up and then they're like, well, damn, maybe we should have had it as a 4-5. And I think it'd be cool to see if they do dial it back because then we truly see OTAs doing their thing, right? Like they tested it out and it was a little too much, so they scaled it back. As long as people don't have hurt feelings about it. And I'll say it here for those that are listening. I get comments all the time on these update videos like, they nerfed too much. I hated it. I think I would rather this than a stale meta or one where the same decks kind of reign in. And like they address Sandman so quickly, man. And we'll get to him here in a second. But I love that initiative there, right? And kind of the targeting of cards that people aren't crazy about. But yeah, dude, Enchantress in a very, very good spot. We'll see if she lasts, but her impact on the meta is definitely here. But Alex, with that, if I were to ask you right now, what are your top 3 decks that aren't Galactus? Go.
Sarah Miracle Monkey, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And for me as well, it's MODOK discard, which is wild. They're not being played at all. There are 2 that I took to Infinite this season. And both of which I think have incredible win rates. I mean, my discard deck was running near 70%. My Sarah Surfer list was running 69%. My Sarah Miracle list with Hitmonkey was running about 70-something percent, 75% for most of the stream that I was doing it. It's incredible what those decks can do, especially when people aren't really expecting them. And it's one of those things where like, as long as you really focus on a deck and like you say, okay, you know what? This is a deck that I like playing. This is a deck that I believe is competitive. Once you learn the ins and outs of it, that's what I love about your videos, by the way, the turn-by-turn stuff that you do, because that stuff's so important. And if you don't have a game plan turn-by-turn, or if you're experimenting with a new deck, or you're picking up a deck that like, Binks was playing or Snapster was playing, and like, you haven't figured out that turn-by-turn strategy yet, and then you mispilot, even in small ways, you can find yourself underperforming. And then as you play, like you play your first 10 games, you're like, well, I have a 15% win rate. This deck sucks. But then the next 10, as you start to iron out those turn by turns, suddenly that win rate creeps up higher and higher. And you start to see how these decks can truly perform.
Yeah, we've talked about it before, but the biggest mistake I see is people will lose the game. They'll switch a deck. They'll lose 2 more. They'll switch a deck, and they keep losing because you're playing new decks each time. You're not even giving yourself a chance to really master the playstyle. Why Rocks and Hawks was the easiest video I've ever made is because I played a billion games with it. I knew every single way to play that deck out, right? And that's what really made it a great deck for me. But if I were to give it to someone else, it takes time. It takes time to learn it. The decks you mentioned, yeah, I think those are all really good. Patriot right now, I think is no matter what type of Patriot deck you build, it's in a good spot because of what it can do. It can go tall. It can go wide. It has surprise factor. It has ongoing. It's got everything going for it. It has Cosmo to prevent things. Even with Enchantress, I still think it's a very solid deck, right? Sarah Control, Monkey, all that in there is really good as well. But that's what's cool, man. You have balanced decks in there. But I would say Control in general. I think Control is severely underrated. And we have underrated on the topic here. And as the 2 decks that I want to kind of laser in on, or maybe 3 here, as underrated decks, I think you nailed it. By far, I think it might be because it's so linear to play, maybe a little predictable. Alex, there's no question that Discard is the most disrespected archetype in Marvel Snap, and it's not even close. Like, discard is such... Now, for 4 seasons, we've been talking about this since February for sure, but even going back before that, discard is such a good archetype, man. It's so underrated. Why do you think it is? I don't know, because it's a good deck.
I think there's this idea that discard is an RNG deck that like just is frustrating, and that like you just leave it all to like Lady Luck, and there's no skill, and there's all these negative things around discard. And I think it comes back to the idea of like Hella discard, for instance, like all the negativity around like Hella used to be totally broken, and now it can be one of the most tilting decks out there. But ultimately, I think that the tools of discard, specifically with Lady Sif and Colleen Wing, those are very controlled discard cards. And we've talked at nauseum about how the Morbius Wolverine Colleen Wing combo is the best turn 2 combo in the entire game.
Yep.
Like really, like those combination of cards can put out so much power so immediately, and it's way more reliable, especially with MODOK, than people are giving it credit for. And MODOK has come down in series as well.
It's what MODOK did. It is really what MODOK did, because now you're able to like get an 8-power presence on the board, build up your Apocalypse, get Swarms out there, Colleen Wing and her value. It's really what he did, I think, by himself. But we're seeing Stature decks come out right now because people are getting Stature a bit more. And you obviously have your traditional MODOK discard. I think personally, pure discard wise, the MODOK one is clearly the best and the most underrated at the moment.
It's wild. It's unbelievable. My win rate, as I said, was like 75% with it. This is high 90s. Like I took this deck to infinite. Like it was just crushing everybody. And at the time, this was like a week ago, no one was talking about discard. I was like, guys, I just released a video about it. I'm like, this deck is insane, and no one's talking about it, right? Yeah. It has everything. It even counters if you include something like Storm. You take out like a Swordmaster, you include Storm. It really kind of counteracts some play with Galactus because they just run out of space. Yep. Like there's nowhere where they can play. Like that kind of location denial is huge.
Yep.
And like I just kept winning games. And MODOK does what Hellcow did, but way better and way more reliably.
100%. And you just brought up Storm, and that brings me to Control, which is the other playstyle that I think is severely underrated at the moment. And it's because of Galactus and all the decks out there. Professor X closing down a lane messes up Sarah decks, and it messes up Galactus decks. Daredevil reading in, you can see exactly what they're doing. Storm for locations, Juggernaut. Right now, with Jeff the Shark, this is probably my favorite archetype to play, the one that I personally will talk about in your section of our Infinite decks. Both Control and Discard, I'm having a premier kind of ultimate deck guide coming out for. I'm both excited about. I'm excited about both of them because there's so much there that's just not being played at the moment. And we're seeing like combinations of two of them, right? Stature Control decks right now are kind of floating out in the meta. Now to end it here, we'll finish up the OTA talk, but I also want to say, I also think people are just like, for whatever reason, still sleeping on Thanos. Guys, if you bought Thanos, he's not a bad card. His win rates statistically are through the roof still. He still works really well. Just the utility of his stones alone, dude, I think he's slept on at the moment.
Yeah, you're seeing a couple iterations of Thanos right now. You're seeing like the Destroy Thanos, which is kind of popular. The ongoing Thanos is really popular. You're seeing Spectrum and Thanos now. Like it's kind of wild what you're seeing. I really like where it's at. And the idea that Thanos is not like so meta relevant that every time you queue into someone with Thanos, you're like, oh, this guy's playing Thanos again, right? You're taking people by surprise now. Like it's a much lower popularity wise in terms of a deck. So like it gives you more room to experiment, and people are less prepared for the Thanos style gameplay, which I think elevates the win rate a little bit.
Yep, 100%. And to close on the decks that we think are in the meta, guys, I think or underrated with that, guys. Hey, Shuri's not dead. Shuri's not dead. She actually feels pretty good right now, and not in the place where if someone's playing Shuri, you're just ripping your hair out. Definitely went down, but again, the stats are still there. If you have Shuri, you're losing. Vision, try it out. Really good still. But as far as the OTAs, and to wrap up this section of combining them here, we had the following cards get a little touched up, which we talked about Enchantress, but Shauna, Lizard, and Sandman. Now, Sandman, I feel like, didn't change his playstyle all too much. I feel like they did pretty good there. He's still going to beat the decks that he's going to beat, but at the same time, 5 power was just a wee bit too much, Alex. And it brought him out of his play rate, which I think was the most important thing, right? Like, Shuri's still good, but when the adjustments happened, people stopped playing her. And I think Sandman kind of got a similar effect because he was by a large margin the most played deck on the way to Infinite, especially towards the end. But Shauna, do you have Shauna?
You know what? I've had it pinned in my shop forever. I'm holding on to like 50 reserves. So I was like, you know what? When High Evil comes out, I'm going to just blow up all my reserves at once, try and see if I just get them for free, because I don't know why I'm obsessed with hoarding tokens for some reason. But I know Shauna, this is a card that I've been talking about. I've been wanting to experiment with this card. I said months ago that I think this is an amazing turn 6 card. Now it's a 4/4. Oh my gosh, this card looks like it is damn good. I mean, damn good, Cozy. I might just buy it.
Dude, it's damn fun and pretty damn good. There's times where you'll be like, what? No, Bast and Blade. There goes my Infinite discarded. Then but like the better you get more often better interactions than worse interactions. And you're right. It's usually on turn 6 when the board fills up and you can't have like an Iron Fist spawn and then it pushes it over. I love Shauna, man. I do. I think Dracula Dump is underrated at the moment. Another deck that I would say in the underrated section. Just made a huge guide on it. Shauna is now a Dr. Doom, and the 410's an average, man. But I gotta say, when you land an Ebony Maw and a Titanium, these bigger numbers, combined with Khazar, it's past 410, it is a Dr. Doom. You are getting to locations that are hard to reach. Her in Pure Zoo, in my opinion, is not where to use her. But her in decks where Khazar it belongs either way, it is perfect. Like, Surprise Ultron had her with a Patriot deck before the buff. Great, right? Now it's going to kind of work even more.
Yes, the idea that she has 4 power now does allow you to play her more confidently on turn 4. And it's like, you're right, it's rare that like Ebony Maw comes out and completely shuts down a lane. But even if it does, it's turn 4, it lands in a lane. That Ebony Maw lane does have an additional 7 power now. Like, it might just be enough anyways. I think it's a fascinating card, and like I'm really looking forward to experimenting with it.
She makes Zoo more fun. It's just funny comparing her as a 4-cost now to like Iron Lad and like those are just so much better cards.
Evolutionary.
But still, she's more competitive. And then lastly, man, we might as well talk about Lizard. Talk about nailing a nerf, bro. They nailed it here. Lizard does the same thing. He is a priority captain. He can lose that priority. But Luke Cage works with him still. He's still 2 F5, right? Still amongst one of the better 2-costs in the game. But now he's not the auto-include. I feel like it was the exact same touch-up as Sunspot got.
Yes, and one thing that's worth noting is that Glenn had mentioned that like this was the softest nerf they'd ever done. And I was like, I don't know if it's the softest nerf they've ever done. I think if this is a 2-1, man, that feels horrible. Like a 2-1 for Lizard's pretty rough. However, it does then kind of force your opponent to kind of answer to that Lizard. It provides more incentive to answer to that Lizard. So then maybe Lizard's doing exactly what it was designed to do. If you're attracting all that attention to that location while attacking other spots on the board, right? So I think Lizard's in a very fascinating spot. It's a very interesting card from the perspective that like that -4 power is going to be what the enemy wants to achieve.
Yep. No.
Could you bait them with it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Baiting is happening now more and more, and I think that he's going to fit in. And then, dude, just him and Enchantress together is crazy. 6 power, 11, or 6 energy, 11 power. Talk about, like, Sauron decks and then 0 decks, too, just getting better and better. So, really think that they did probably it was the first official one. They did the other one the week before. They nailed it. 10 out of 10 on what they did adjust, and excited for the next couple of weeks ahead. I don't know if we're getting one next week. I forgot how it works with the patch day, right? Or whatever, since it's the season pass. But either way, man, really like what they've done. And I think going into Conquest, we have so much meta to figure out before June, man. Sign me up. It's going to be a good 2 months.
You're right. There's going to be the next OTA update before we even understand what this meta is.
Yep.
Like, it's crazy how fast things are moving in Marvel Snap.
It keeps it fresh, that's for sure. And guys, Nebula is out later tonight as watching this video, and I'm telling you, it's going to be a killer season. We're both, I'm sure, going to have plenty of videos on it. I'll have my best decks definitely the day following, and we have a lot to talk about next Monday as our new spot for the Snapchat. Now, guys, really appreciate all the reviews we've been getting on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as all the YouTube comments, guys. We listen back to all of them, and really appreciate you guys coming back to the Snapchat time and time again. Alex, dude, what a week, what an episode, man, and I'm excited for the future. Good luck out there in the new season. We will see you next Monday, and as always, my friends, until the next one, happy snapping.